to start talking about what we have to look forward to as Christians, because we know that there's some place that's much greater than this. We could spend time talking about the golden streets and the pearly gates. We could talk about, what does it mean for golden streets and pearly gates? What is that? I personally think that's figurative, and I'm not trying to be blasphemous in any way, but, the golden streets and pearly gates, I'm okay with those. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean I can't wait to see who's there. And what I mean is there's a lot of people that my time on earth has been cut short with them, and I just want some extra time. Someone once asked at a funeral of a really close loved one of mine, they said, would you like to have him back? I said, never. Because they're seeing things that I don't even understand. They're seeing things that I don't even want to know. And I don't want to bring them back from that circumstance. I want to go see them. It's kind of like David. When David sinned with Bathsheba, Nathan came to David and he said, hey, David, I'm going to tell you a little parable. He heard the parable. David got mad. Then Nathan said, hey, you're the man. If you remember, they said your child's going to die. That's going to be one of the consequences of that action. So when that child died, David says, he gets up, he gets everything ready, and he says, he can't come to me. I have to go to him. When we talk about the grace that's to come, we are talking about something that, I'm going to be honest, I don't think that we will ever truly understand until we make that crossover. Because we can try to justify it in our minds all the time. In fact, look at this passage of Scripture just for a moment in 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 13. We're going to come back to this. We're going to bounce around just a tad for a minute. But it says, therefore, preparing for our minds for action and being sober-minded, set your hope on the grace fully that will be brought to you at the revelation of Christ Jesus. He says there's going to be a grace that's going to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus. Now, if you will, just for a moment, go over to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 and verse 13. This is a passage that we often hear when it comes to funerals. I've read it probably more at funerals than just about any other time. And it's Paul's statement to the church in Thessalonica, and he says, but we do not want you to be uninformed, brethren, about those who are falling asleep. There's a lot of people who have a lot of questions about death. And there's a lot of people who fear death. They fear leaving this earth because they don't know what's on the other side. And if you think that might be a little bit silly, I want you to think back when you were younger. And you're in your bed at night, everything's peaceful, everything's quiet, then all of a sudden, something falls behind your closet door. You don't know what that is. But you don't walk over and go, I'll see what it is. When you're little and you're unknowledgeable, what do? Mom, Dad? And they come in and they go, in their loving parent way, what? And you say, there's a monster behind the closet. And they said, no, there's not. Go to bed. You say, yes, there is. It's making noise. No, it's not. Go to bed. So they leave. And you sit there and you pull the covers up because you know that at any moment it's going to jump out and attack you. You don't know what it is. But for some reason, and we all did this, psychology thing, you believe that if you pull that sheet up, that sheet's going to protect you from this big evil monster that's going to come. And you sit there a little bit longer, and something else, you hear this little chink. It's not even a loud noise. It's a small noise. And what do again? Mom, Dad? They come in that loving way again, and they say, go to bed. Now, as silly as we think that is, that's how some people leave this earth. They don't know what's on the other side. They don't have the knowledge. They haven't pursued it. They haven't thought about it. The only thing that they know is there's something out there that they really don't want to know. And some people go out of this world, and I guess it's one of the, I call it a privilege, but sometimes it's not. In 25 years of local work, I guess the privilege is to watch people leave this earth. Some have gone out kicking and screaming. Some have gone out crying. But I can tell you that some of the greatest Christians I have ever known go out smiling. Because they know that there's something on the other side. So when Paul says he doesn't want them to be uninformed, he says this in verse 13, that you grieve as others who have no hope. For since we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so through Jesus, God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep. For this we declare to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive and are left until the coming of the Lord will by no means precede those who have fallen asleep. For the Lord himself would descend from heaven with a shout, with the cry of a command, the voice of the archangel, the sound of the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive and who are left will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so we shall always be with the Lord. Therefore encourage or comfort one another with these words. When we think about the grace that's to come, we're reminded that we're going to have a home with God in heaven. I would also refer you to 2 Corinthians chapter 4, beginning in verse 16. This is a passage that I have been told as you get a little bit older, you understand it a little bit more. Because it's what I like to call a life experience passage. Paul, writing to them, says, so we do not lose heart, though our outward self is wasting away. We can't do the things that we once did. I think it's pretty funny. I will leave here and I will go home on Thursday, and Friday I will be at my chiropractor's office. And when I first started going to the chiropractor, he said, so, tell me about what you've done in your life. And I said, 48. I started walking at 8 months old. My mom says I started running at 8 months old. I said, so for about 47 and a half years, because I crawled early, I said, I'm paying for everything I've ever done. He said, like, why are you in today? And I said, because I threw my back out. He said, how? I bit my lip. I looked at him and I said, sleeping. Some of you know. And he looked at me and he said, congratulations. I said, yeah, it's neat and it's nice. I said, well, I woke up and my wife said, what's wrong? And I said, I had a bad dream. She said, what was it? And I said, I don't know, but I threw my back out. So when our physical bodies start to waste away, notice what he says. The inward man is being renewed day by day. Why? It's a little bit closer. It's a little bit closer until we get to leave. Most people want to stay. But there are people who say, hey, I'm going to live the best life that I can, and I'm going to live it. We're going to talk about this with a lesson I'm going to present to you at least on Wednesday at 6 o'clock on how to live a good life. And we're going to talk about some of this because we're going to talk about some people really want to live a good life because they know that they can't wait to get to the other side. They can't wait. And he says, your inward man's being renewed day by day. Verse 17, for this light momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. What's the majority of what we take into our minds is what we see. We see something and we become like that little kid. And we have to have it. We've got to just, it's got to be our why, because we see it and we start to desire it. But in the passage that we're talking about, once again, notice what it says. It says, therefore, preparing our minds for action, being sober-minded, set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you. We've got grace that's coming at the revelation of Jesus. But let me ask you a question. The question is, as Christians, is the best yet to come? I just want you to think about that for a moment. Because I was teaching a Bible class several years ago in Scott Depot, West Virginia. And I asked one question, and that one statement has resonated with me the majority of my life since then. I asked the question, very simple question. And the question was, why aren't Christians happy? And I saw this visitor in the back. Hands shot up real quick, and I thought, oh boy. So I said, sir, do you have an opinion? He said, yes, I can tell you exactly why. And I thought, I don't know him from Adam, and this is about to get ugly. He said, because most Christians act like they've been weaned on pickles and baptized in pickle juice. I looked at him and I thought, that's exactly right. Because what should Christians be? Should Christians not be the most joyful, I didn't say happy, the most joyful people on the face of the earth? See, joy is what comes from the inside. Happiness is based on external circumstances. That's why December 26th, I don't know if you know this or not, it's called National Whiners Day. You can look it up. And one reason is because every kid gets that toy and they play with that toy. What happens midway through the day? It breaks. Happiness is external. Joy is internal. Why does Paul say rejoice in the Lord always? And again, I say rejoice. See, we need to be people of joy and excitement as we go out into the world. Now, that your joy may be different than my joy. I'm more external sometimes. There's other times where I just kind of want to hide back, and I just kind of want to be me just for a little bit and hide back. But then I like being me out in the open sometimes. My wife and I, her name's Carrie. Carrie and I, we go to Panera a lot at our house. If you follow us on social media, you'll see a lot of Panera stuff that's out there. I go to Panera because I'm part of their unlimited drink subscription where you can go in, you can get a Coke or whatever. I get coffee and I get unsweet tea and I get hot tea. And I go in every day and I ask them the same question. They look at me and they see me coming and they see us now. And as soon as I walk through the door, Sammy, he's a little guy, and he'll hold his hand up. You want 2 cups or you want 1? And I'll say 2. And he just kind of looks at me, and people will turn around and go, Sammy, my man, what's happening? People will kind of look, and by the way, if you want to get through a Panera line, you just start acting happy, and they'll step aside. And I ask them, I say, hey, what's your day, 1 through 10? 1 through 10. 1 being worst day ever, 10 being best day ever. Sammy, what are we having, buddy? Well, I'm having a 4. Excellent. You're having a 4. We're going to get you to 8. How do we get you to 8? Well, after about a week of that, I walked in one day and I heard this phrase as I came in the door. They looked at me and they said, 1 to 10, what are you having? Oh, I couldn't help myself. I got a big mouth. My filter didn't kick on. I said, I'm having a 10. He said, why? And I said, I don't have to go to hell. Everybody in the restaurant went, who's that guy? And here's why I bring that up to you. I was challenged a long time ago by somebody that you may have heard. His name's Willie Franklin. He said, hey, why aren't we happy? Why don't you be what you know you can be? Proverbs 23 and verse 7 says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So if we internalize happiness, if we internalize joy, shouldn't we be joyful people, knowing that the best is yet to come? Knowing that what happens? We go into a store, we ask somebody, and I've been there and done that. I went and had to walk in one day, use my credit card to pay for gas because the pump was broken. First world problem. I was kind of upset. I walk in, I look at the cashier, and I said, you having a great day today? She looked me straight in the face. She went, no. I said, how can I make your day better? And I knew what she was thinking. You know what she was thinking? Leave. That's what she was thinking. So I asked her, I said, how can I pray for you? She said, why do you want to pray for me? I said, well, somebody prayed for me. Figure I'd pray for you. I saw a glimmer of a smile. So I always have to get in the last word sometimes. Had a problem with that. So as I walked out the door, I kind of stuck my head back in and I said, see, it's not that bad. And I took off because I didn't know what she was going to throw or what she was going to do. The only reason I say that is because those came to me from challenges from somebody else. And when you start challenging that, and as a Christian, we realize a couple things. Number 1, we realize the best is yet to come. Number 2, we realize that we don't have to go to hell. Number 3, we realize that we are on the path to heaven. Number 4, we realize that God is going to take care of us. If we believe the passage that all things work together for good, that doesn't mean we understand. But that all things work together for good to those who are called according to the purpose of God. He's called them according to His purpose. If we understand that, shouldn't we be excited? Shouldn't we be happy knowing that the best is to come? Well, let me tell you why maybe some people aren't. First of all, the first word in our passage today is the word therefore. If you notice that passage, it says, therefore, preparing your minds for action and being sober-minded, set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. When I was a student at Freed-Hardeman University, I had the opportunity to sit in a Bible class at the Henderson Church of Christ there on White Avenue, and it was the book of Hebrews by Alan Hires. No offense to any of my professors that year, I learned more in that Sunday morning Bible class than I've learned in a lot of Bible classes. And I just sat there and I took notes, And I marked up a Bible and a notebook and everything else. And here's what I remember. He said every single week. And it got so repetitive, I found myself saying it during the week. Whenever somebody would go, so anyways, therefore, I would go, therefore is a word, you need to go find out what it's there for. And they look at me and they go, you're still in that Alan Hires class, aren't you? Absolutely. So notice what he says. Go all the way back up for a second. These are things that have been talked about today. First of all, verse 3 of chapter 1. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who according to His great mercy has caused us to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus. Now, once again, we're blessed with a living hope. Go down to verse 6. In this you rejoice. So we've got a living hope. We're rejoicing in the living hope. Look in verse 8. Though you have not seen Him, you love Him, referring to Jesus. Though you do not see Him now, you believe in Him and rejoice with joy that is inexpressible and filled with glory. He's saying you've got a hope. You've got a great thing in Jesus, an eternal thing in Jesus. You've got joy in Jesus. Verse 10, concerning this salvation. So now you've got salvation. That's what he's telling them. You've got salvation. Then the passages that Aaron got into today about this is what was written by the prophets. This is what is looked at by the angels. So since you have this, not you wish for it. See, I don't like the word hope in English. Because the word hope in English means, yeah, okay. Ask somebody, are you going to have a good day? How do they say it? I hope so. That's not hope. If we get in a car and we're going to drive back to Gadsden, okay, and you're going to ride with me, and we're outside, and we're leaving on Thursday morning, we're leaving the hotel, and the person at the hotel says, hey, you going to have a good trip? And I say, I hope so. Are you going to get in a car with me? Because I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to get in the car with you. Either I'm going to take the keys. Because the way I go through Macon, and I go through this little tiny city, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, called Atlanta. And everybody there has a NASCAR sticker on their car. They think they are that driver. And they just zoom, and they fly. And they don't get real close to you. They just rub up against you and make you move out of the way. And that's just the thing. Now, do you want to hopefully, wishfully get through Atlanta? Or do you confidently expect to get through Atlanta? Or do you just avoid Atlanta? Hope is confident expectation. I know this is the case because here's the evidence that I have to base on. It's not wishful thinking. So he says you have this hope and you have this salvation. Now notice what he says. So therefore, because you have that, you need to do something. You need to prepare your minds for action. You need to be sober-minded, and you need to set your hope fully on the grace that's going to be revealed. But let me ask you another question. Very simple question. I want to refer you to a passage. I want to encourage you to go back and read it, but I want to encourage you to look at it probably differently than you've heard it before. And if I'm wrong, you can come back and tell me. I'll be here till Thursday morning early when I leave. Are you ready? Are you ready to receive that hope? You know, just a few moments ago when Greg spoke, Greg said that the devil's job is not to discourage us, it's to devour us. I don't know if you caught that. Then a little bit before that, David Decker said that our holiness is what we need to have. That set apartness because of God. I want you to think about that. As you think about this question, are you ready? And here's why. In Matthew chapter 25, if you want to write this down, this is Jesus talking about various things here. He's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem in 24 and 25. He's going to make the transition, and nobody knows the day or the hour. But he tells this parable, and I just want to share it with you just really quickly, okay? Because I know our time is about up, but just really quickly. It's the parable of the talents. He gives one man 5 talents, one man 2 talents, one man 1 talent. But do you remember why he gives it to them? He gives it to them based upon their abilities. He doesn't just say, here you go. He gives it to them based upon their abilities, which meant that the master knew those servants. And he knew what they can handle. And he knew what they were able to do. And how did he do that? Because he had a relationship with them. So he gives 1 5, 1 2, and 1 1. And he goes away. Now, we know what happens. The one that's 5 goes out and he makes 5 more. The one that's 2 goes out and makes 2 more. The one who has 1 goes and buries it in a mayonnaise jar in the backyard. So when the master comes, what happens? Right? The one who 5 comes up and says, Master, here you go. I made you 5 more. Blessed are you. Come on in. Let's go. By the way, Chris Gallagher paraphrased version of this. The one who has 2 brings it to him and he says, hey, you made 2? All right, come on in. Enter into the joy of your master. And here's what I love about this. And by the way, if you look at a talent is 20 years' wages. So the man with 5 talents got 100 years' wages. Think about that. Because here's why. Would you take 100 years' wages if somebody gave it to you? Now, most of us would. There's always a couple exceptions, and I love the exceptions. Do I have to pay taxes on it? We're giving you money. Doesn't matter. Would you take it? You know, yeah. What would you do with it? I don't know, but I'd do something fun with it. I'm going to go out and I'm going to do something. Okay, so if you won't take the 100, are you going to take the 40 years' wages? Somebody said, okay, Chris, you asked the question, what would you do? Very simple. I'm going to be absolutely honest with you. I would go buy a private island, move my family there, and do mission work. That's exactly what I would do. Some of you will get that later, by the way. So some of you are getting it now. I got you. But what happened to the 1 talent guy? Remember what he did? He went and he hid it. And he comes to his master and he says, Master, I knew you were a hard man. So reaping where you didn't sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. So here's just the 1 back. What amazes me since I've been little is this. The master is not satisfied with the same amount. He says, you should have at least got a little bit of interest off of it. And if you know the banking system there, it was going to be a little tiny bit of interest. Smaller than what we have today. He says, but you did nothing. I trusted you with this that I have worked for, that this has been mine, and it's your abilities. You've done nothing with it. So he says, grab it from him and get him out of here. You know what I think that's a parable about? It's a parable about us. Ephesians chapter 4, starting in verse 7, says that God has given abilities to man. Some to be apostles, some to be prophets, some to be pastors and teachers, for the equipping of the saints, for the work of the ministry. And you get into Romans chapter 12, Romans chapter 13, and it talks about he's been given grace, and we all have a measure of grace that's been given to us by God. And the question is, have we used what we've been given? And that's not a guilt trip statement. That's just a reflection statement. Have we used what we've been given? Because one day, the master's going to come back. So my question to you this afternoon is, are you ready? Are you ready to receive that? If not, let's go through these really quick. Once again, I appreciate you being patient, but I'm going to go through these really, really quick. The first one, notice he says, get ready and to prepare. The King James Version uses the words, gird up your loins. Taught that to our teenage class, and they all kind of looked at me and they said, that sounds bad. What does that mean? A modern day translation is this, roll up your sleeves. It's time to get to work. You guys, most people here, I'm assuming, I'm just going to make an assumption, most people here are from the South in the Florida area. And one thing that you have that I don't like, that I experienced my first one in Kinston, North Carolina in 1999, was a hurricane. I grew up in West Virginia. It snows, and you got snow. I believe the Lord put it there. The Lord can take it away. That's my philosophy. But I didn't know what a hurricane was. My wife went through Hugo when Hugo was in Charleston, South Carolina in 1988. So when a hurricane came out, we were 3 weeks out, and she says, Chris, we got to go to the store, and we got to get some things. I said, what? What do we got to get? I said, everybody's talking about milk and bread. I could care less. My wife has a gluten allergy. We don't get bread. We get coffee and Oreo cookies. That's in the Bible. I'm not sure where. That's what we go get. And if you notice, they're always there when you go get them. So as we're talking about this, I'm as knowledgeable as the hurricane. So I go, and my wife says, we need to go get batteries. I'm from West Virginia. I don't know what a hurricane is. I thought it was a tornado that just went out on water and made a splash. That's what I thought it was. So I come back. You guys will love this for those of you in Florida. I come back with rechargeable batteries. My wife looks at me and says, what's wrong with you? And I said, you married me. Got the mental age of a 9-year-old. What do you mean? And she said, we're not going to have any power. Guess what I did? I went, batteries? She said, they're rechargeable, Chris. And I went, oh yeah, sorry. Why? I'm not there. I'm not in the preparation for a hurricane. I didn't know what that was. In fact, when the eye of the storm came through, I went outside. My wife goes, go look outside. It's beautiful. So I go outside. I was playing in the puddles in the street. I was walking down the street. I come back. My wife had locked me out of the house. You can call and ask her. She thought that was the funniest thing in the world. I didn't, because I knew the other side of that was coming. But you see, when we talk about preparation, we're not talking the day of. When the trumpet sounds and the dead arise, you can't go, hey, Lord, wait, I need to be baptized now. Hey, wait, I got to get, I had a guy tell me this not too long ago. I'm not going to be baptized until I get everything ready first. If you get everything ready without Jesus, then you don't need Jesus. You need Jesus. So he's telling them to get prepared. So you've got to roll up your sleeves because you're getting ready to fight a battle. And he's going to talk about that in 1 Peter. He's going to talk about that suffering that's coming. He's going to talk about, as Greg mentioned, the roaring lion seeking somebody to devour. He says, if you want that hope, you got to get ready for that hope. You got to get ready for it. And by the way, when we talk about getting ready for things, sometimes we are not ready to be blessed by God. That's a whole different lesson. But sometimes we are not ready to be blessed by God because we approach God sometimes with a little bit of frustration, and it's hard to receive anything with a closed fist. Sometimes we need to approach God and say, God, what can we do? How can you use us today? But we've got to be prepared. I would also ask you to go over and check out the words of Jesus when Jesus talks about the man who tried to build a tower and didn't have enough money to finish it because that man didn't prepare. We've got to prepare. We've got to be clothed in the full armor of God. And that armor is so important. But there's also another aspect sometimes we leave off in Ephesians chapter 6, and that's verse 18. Verse 18 says, praying always with the Spirit. One of the things, if we're going to get ready to receive this grace to come, not only is our preparation, but we have to have a sober mind. Our mind has to be clear. Why do you think the Bible talks so much about setting your mind on things above, not on things of this earth? Colossians chapter 3 and verse 2. Paul says in Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, I beseech you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. Some translations at the end say spiritual worship. But it says, do not be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Because what goes in here is what comes out here and what comes out in our hands. It's shown that if you start your day bad, your day is going to be bad. Okay? Most of you probably grew up with an alarm clock. And you remember that beautiful sound it made? And you thought, what is going on? You know, the average parent gets to spend per day 45 minutes with their elementary school child. Per day. That's the average amount of time in the entire course of a day. With a high school student, it's about 23 minutes. Do you realize where the majority of that occurs? In the morning. Guess what the kids are told in the morning? Get up, hurry up, come on, let's go, move, out the door, boom, and everybody runs out the door in less than 5 minutes, and it's usually yelling. How does that start somebody's day? Doesn't start it too well, right? because their mind is set on something else already. So we've got to challenge our minds. We've got to move our minds towards heaven. Hebrews chapter 12, I would encourage you to look at verse 1 again. It says there are things in our life that are sin, and there's also weights that slow us down. A lot of that weight has to be up here. A lot of it has to be up here. We've got to release some of that. Maybe it's the burdens of guilt that we have, but we have to think clearly. Then we have to do this. We have to set our hope. Notice what he says in that passage. Set your hope fully on the grace. He's literally telling them to complete your hope. He's telling them to complete the process. So if you want to be able to receive this grace to come, you have to do a couple things. First of all, what you have to do is you have to get ready. And you can't wait until the last possible moment. One of the things in our brotherhood that has sometimes troubled me is, and this is no offense to anybody, when we partake of the Lord's Supper, somebody will say, here's a song to prepare our minds for the Lord's Supper. I believe if you haven't prepared before you've walked in the doors of that building, then a song is probably not going to do it for you. Because right in the middle of the song, one of those little tricycle motors that you have in your congregation as kids is going to say something right in the middle of it. You know, one time in the most solemn moment in a little country congregation we attended growing up, partaking of the Lord's Supper, right in the middle, this boy yells out in the back, "Mommy, get your money next." Whole congregation lost it, and I thought, well, we got to start this process over. Because to be able to partake of the Lord's Supper on a Sunday, you need to live right Sunday to Sunday. You don't just need to all of a sudden show up and think, here we go. And it's not a little meal. It's a memorial feast where we set aside that time. But that's got to start early. See, when we talk about this, we prepare, we clear our minds, and we set our hope. We start to complete this process. We start to get ready to receive this. And it's really, you know what it's on? It's on us. It's not on God. God has given us the open door. He's given us the door of opportunity, and He says, all right, now it's your time to walk through it. Let me share this little story with you. Then we'll close with a prayer for my behalf. If there's any announcements, they'll take care of those. You know, when I think about this, I think about when I left in 1994. I transferred from West Virginia University to Freed-Hardeman. I didn't know what I was getting into. I left 26,000 students for 1,200. I left a town rather large for Henderson, Tennessee. If you've never been to Henderson, it would fit inside of this auditorium. And I remember the first time I drove home. Now, to get to Freed-Hardeman, I didn't understand. My parents and my brothers and my sister, they were on a cruise, and I left, and I piled everything, all my belongings, which was pretty much like a backpack and a suitcase, in my car, and I had to drive 11 and a half hours to Freed-Hardeman University, and I had to leave West Virginia. I spent the night at my grandparents' house, made my way into Kentucky. I went down this beautiful road that's boring as anything but beautiful, called the Bluegrass Parkway, from Lexington almost to Elizabethtown. Then I took I-65 down to Nashville, 40 over to Jackson, and 45 down. That was before the days of GPS. It's when you had the map, where you were trying to drive like this and hold the map out and all that. And I had 260 air conditioning. For those of you who know what that was, you just roll down the windows and hope for the best while you read the map. If you're under 30, Google it. I promise you it'll be okay. So on the way home, I got through Lexington, Kentucky, came across on I-64, and there was this glow in the distance, and it seemed so redneck, honestly. But it was a beautiful glow. It was one of the oil refineries. Lit up the whole mountainside. Right past that glow, there was a sign. That sign said, "Welcome to West Virginia." As I got closer to that sign, didn't matter what time it was. Sometimes after finals, it would be 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'd roll down my window. Even in the winter, it could be freezing cold, it didn't matter. I'd roll down this one. I'd reach across my little car, and I'd roll down the other one. Stuff flying all over the car. and I'd take that John Denver Country Roads cassette tape. And right before the state line, I'd slide that cassette tape in. You'd hear the click. You'd hear the music come on. It would start to increase. And I'd turn the radio up, and I'd see that sign. It'd be blaring, and you could see across the river. You could see the glow from the oil refinery. Once again, so redneck. And you'd see it come through, and I'd have my head out the window, and I'd sing country roads, and I'd be getting hit by snow or rain or birds or mosquitoes or whatever, and I would just be so happy. And from the time I crossed that line, my heart felt a little bit more at ease. And as I drove through Huntington, West Virginia, and through Barbersville, then over through Hurricane, then over through Taze Valley, then over through, I get through Nitro, and I get through St. Albans, I get through Dunbar, and I hit South Charleston, I hit Charleston, and I cut up all the way on 79, and I'd go through Elkview, and I'd start making my way up through Sutton Gasaway and through Burnsville, and I'd come across to Buchanan, and when I got to Buchanan, I'd say to myself, 25 more minutes. And for some reason, David Decker's not here. He talked about speeding earlier. For some reason, that pedal would go a little bit closer to the floor. That little black Nissan Sentra would move a little bit faster. And by the way, the whole time I'm just rewinding and playing country roads for about 3 hours. And I'd pull into our driveway at 410 West Philadelphia Avenue in Bridgeport, West Virginia at the time. And I'd pull in, and there would be the kitchen light on. My mom would be up. She'd have a whole pot of coffee ready. Everybody else would be sound asleep. I'd walk in that house. I'd grab a cup of coffee. I'd sit down for 5 minutes, and I'd go, Mom, I'm going to bed. And I'd go up in my bed, and that bed was as old as I was at the time. Probably nasty as could be. Had a divot in it where I slept in the middle. Perfect for me. Had my pillow that's there. I couldn't wait to be home. I don't tell too many people that when I had to leave about 3 days later, I usually shed a tear or two because I was leaving home. You know, country roads and a West Virginia sign and a 1990 Nissan Sentra barely held together with a couple screws, some tires that barely stayed on a time or two, holds nothing to our journey towards heaven. How is your journey going? For me, I no longer cross that place in going home to West Virginia because I've realized in the very short time that I've been here that there's a whole lot better place that we get to go. And if we prepare ourselves, if we become sober-minded, and if we get ready to go and we set our hope upon those things and we drive our life and we set our goals and we make our passion to where we need to be, that God is going to take care of us. My friends, I wish the best for you. I wish and I hope and I confidently expect when I say that if we don't meet ever again outside of this building, that we'll meet in that land that's there. But it's our choice because God has already paved the way. Let's bow in a moment of prayer. Father in heaven, I appreciate your loving kindness today. Father, I appreciate the way that you've been with us today. Father, I appreciate the opportunity to share a message with these great people. And Father, I pray that this message has been insightful, that's been motivational towards them. And Father, as my brothers and sisters, we pray for each other. May we lift one another up. And Father, we pray that if somebody is here and they need to make a change, that they'll do that today. We ask all this in your Son Jesus' name. Amen.